thanks for tuning in to the Oxygen Alliance YouTube channel, where we share the Concentrator Talk virtual meeting hosted every Thursday from 2 to 3 p.m. Central African Time. In the talk, we discuss different aspects of oxygen concentrator assessment, use, and maintenance. And please don't forget to subscribe and hit that notifications bell.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Oxygen Talk today, brought to you by the Oxygen Alliance. My name is Amarpreet Rai, and I'm so pleased to be hosting the call today. I'm currently in Chicago, and I'm joined by my colleagues Timothy Matunga and Jerry Douglas, along with our usual technicians from OpenO2 and Sanrai. Today is where we do our monthly change in meeting with the Oxygen Talk. For those who may not be aware, the Concentrator Talk is a virtual meeting that the Oxygen Alliance hosts every Thursday from 2 to 3 p.m. Central African Time to discuss the different aspects of oxygen concentrator assessment, use, and maintenance. The Oxygen Talk is where once a month we invite experts from anything related to oxygen to come and present to all of us. We are going to try to do things a little bit differently today using the Q&A function, because we are really excited about the meeting that we have here for you today. So very similar to the polls that you access every week, if you go to the activities button, which on your laptop is in the bottom right of your screen, or on your phone is in the panel, there is a section called question and answer. Please feel free to put any questions that you have during the presentation in that chat, and we will monitor that and try and answer either during or after the conversation. But we hope that this will give you a little bit of an easier way to remember and ask your questions as we're getting into the presentation. So it is my absolute pleasure to invite Will Snider here to present to us today for today's Oxygen Talk. And Will is from the D Prize. The D Prize is a twice-yearly social business competition that offers each winner up to $20,000 to launch a new social venture. D Prize accepts applications from aspiring entrepreneurs in multiple areas. One of these areas is oxygen concentrator maintenance, where applicants are challenged to design a new business servicing and maintaining oxygen concentrators in low-resource hospitals. Will Snider, Senior Operations Lead at D Prize, is here to tell you more about this exciting funding opportunity. Will was an early employee of One Acre Fund, where he helped distribute seed and fertilizer to smallholder farmers in Kenya and Ethiopia. He started working for D Prize as a competition judge and joined full-time in 2019. It is my pleasure to introduce Will and to invite you here today. And now I'm going to turn it over to him. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amarpreet. I really appreciate the introduction, and thank you for having me here today. It's very generous that you would say that today's Concentrator Talk is featuring a guest expert, because I feel like you are all the experts in this space. And here at D Prize, we are looking to connect experts to the funding to get started on their amazing ideas. And I'm really excited also that for the full team from Oxygen Alliance to be here, including the team from OpenO2 in Malawi, because in many respects, OpenO2 is the inspiration for this D Prize challenge around oxygen concentrators. We'll get into this in the presentation, but basically, D Prize is trying to provide pilot funding to get new ventures launched that are going to grow to be the next OpenO2s in their market. And that may be you on this call. And I know there may be people on this call who've applied for D Prize funding in the past. So I'm just going to give an overview of the D Prize competition, of our oxygen concentrator challenge. And yeah, let me just share my screen first. Great, so that's my screen is loading now. So yeah, I'm here to talk about D Prize. So D Prize, at its core, we are a grant-funded nonprofit that works to distribute cost-effective poverty interventions. But we do that a little bit differently from other organizations. We do that by empowering new entrepreneurs, new social ventures, and getting them started with funding. So with the D Prize, we run a twice yearly global business competition where you can apply to win up to $20,000 in pilot funding. And specifically for this call, I think what's interesting is you could win that funding to launch a pilot maintaining oxygen concentrators in low resource hospitals. So today, this is kind of a rough outline of what I want to discuss. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of D Prize, kind of our mission and philosophy, what we look for. And then I'm going to talk about our oxygen concentrator challenge. It's one of our newer challenges. It's only a few years old. And as I mentioned, it was really inspired by the work of organizations like OpenO2 and our desire to see oxygen concentrators maintained in low resource hospitals around the world. As you all know, this work really came to the attention of the world due to the pandemic, but I don't need to tell all of you. You've been doing this work for a long time. It's predated. The problems have predated the pandemic, and they will outlast it as well. So we'll talk a little bit about the challenge itself, and then I'll talk about how you apply for funding, kind of what you need to put together, the deadlines that are coming up, and then also what we look for as a funder. And I realize some on this call, the D Prize opportunity may not be relevant to your idea, but you're probably looking for funding, regardless. And so hopefully some of these insights will help you understand kind of what funders look for when they're looking at a proposal. And D Prize ourselves, as I mentioned, we are a grant-funded nonprofit. So we have the experience both of judging ideas that are presented to us, but also we go out there and we pitch for funding as well. And so I sympathize with how difficult it is to raise funding and the frustrations. And I'm happy to talk about that as well. And then at the end, I'll save some time in case there's any questions about D Prize, about what we look for, about our funding opportunity, or really anything. So just to start with an overview of D Prize and our core philosophy. So here at D Prize, we believe that there are existing solutions to poverty. There's been imagine something like an oxygen concentrator. This is a medical device that we know provides high quality medical oxygen to people who need it. Yet, as everyone on this call knows, it's failing to reach people at mass scale. You have things like oxygen concentrators that already exist, but are sitting unused in low resource hospitals around the world because they are, the staff may not know how to maintain them. They have not been used in a while. And so they're not actually performing their function. And we believe at D Prize that there's a whole host of products and services like this that we know have an impact on the lives of people living in poverty, but they're just not reaching them. So here at D Prize, we're searching for amazing entrepreneurs who are going to increase access to what we call proven poverty interventions. So in addition to things like oxygen concentrators, we look at things like Pico solar lamps, basic health interventions like the drug misoprostol, which can be used to treat postpartum hemorrhage, quality seed and fertilizer for farmers, a whole host of products and services that we know impact people's lives. We're really looking for amazing, aspiring entrepreneurs who know their market, who have a vision, but they just lack that capital to get started. And I don't need to tell you, it's incredibly difficult to get that first bit of money to get going. It's hard at every stage, right? But in particular at the launch, if you've got a career doing something else, if you have a family, whatever is going on in your life, the actual risk to go off and start your own business is quite high. And then even once you've started, if you're sort of going along at a really low level and haven't taken in outside funding, how you access that first, relatively large tranche of outside funding, it's a mystery. And D Prize is hoping to de-risk that earliest stage and actually take away some of the mystery in how you get funded. So I've talked a lot about D Prize already, but what is D Prize? We are a social business competition. We award up to $20,000 to each winning team. We give around 30 awards per year. That number is actually going up, but right now it stands around 30. And we give this award to new entrepreneurs starting businesses that distribute proven poverty interventions to people who need them. How do we define new entrepreneur? Well, generally, we don't fund any venture that is older than 18 months or that has raised more than $30,000 in outside funding. There are sometimes exceptions to that, but in general, our winners are at the idea stage or very, very new. And as I mentioned, we make these awards in multiple areas, including oxygen concentrator maintenance. So our O2 concentrator challenge, I've described this a little bit, but yeah, you could win up to $20,000 to create a new organization or to catalyze an existing organization that's operating at a very low scale and that's very new. And this funding is meant to support the first 3 months of operations. In general, we think that you might service around 15 to 20 concentrators in 2 to 3 hospitals. Those are just guidelines based on some of our first winners, and I'll talk about them in a minute. But I think this is what we look at as kind of the scope we're looking to support. Obviously, if you can reach more hospitals with that funding, more concentrators, that's fantastic, but that's going to depend a lot on your market. And this is crucial, this last bullet on this slide. We're really looking for applications from entrepreneurs who have a vision to grow this business. So we're not hoping to support just this, let's say like a small lab working with 1 or 2 hospitals. That's obviously impactful, and we're excited about that. But we want to see you bring a vision to grow that work beyond that initial lab. So could you serve 100 hospitals within 5 years or more? I mean, could you scale regionally, nationally? And that's going to involve a vision to raise more funding post-D-Prize and not do all the repairs yourself. Build out a team, build out a model and a process by which you're going to manage, a sales force of biomedical technicians that go out and repair oxygen concentrators. So when you apply to D-Prize, we have essentially on our website, you'll see a challenge document, a specific document about our challenge around oxygen concentrators that outlines kind of everything we're looking for. But these are some of the questions, the most important questions that we ask our applicants. The first is, how are you going to manage and develop your team of technicians? And you may already have a great plan. Maybe you're already managing a team of a couple technicians. But our questions would be, okay, how do you take that and then manage a team of 20, a team of 40, a team of 60 technicians? And so that involves, recruitment, training, motivation. We want to understand how you develop a sales force at scale. Our second question, how do you access spare parts? And this is where the Oxygen Alliance, I think, can play a super supportive role. It's, as many of you know, I mean, again, you are the experts. I think a lot of what I'm going to be telling you here is stuff that you're already very familiar with. But a big question we ask is, Jim, what's your plan to access spare parts? What are your logistics of servicing hospitals? So in this case, a lot of our applicants are just starting to think about this question. Perhaps you're already more advanced here and you've got answers, but a lot of our applicants struggle to describe how they would develop a long-term relationship with hospitals beyond just simple repairs. So here we're trying to figure out, is there a way that you can structure a kind of long-term maintenance contract with a hospital such that you're making sure there's more uptime for these concentrators, that you are going to come in before they're in total disrepair? And I actually have to be transparent here that even some of our winners right now don't have great answers to these questions. I think it's just a challenging question overall. And I'd actually be curious to learn from the Oxygen Alliance kind of more about how your membership is thinking about working with hospitals. The next question is, demand generation and pricing. And this ties into those service contracts. Do you have a way of kind of creating a revenue stream from hospitals? And then the final question, what data are you collecting to prove impact? And I think the simple answer to this that we hear from a lot of applicants is that they're collecting information on just how many oxygen concentrators are working. What's the O2 concentration? What are the O2 levels? And those are helpful KPIs. But I think we're also interested in some health KPIs for the actual patients at the hospital. And I realize that for a lot of your ventures, this is kind of difficult information to access. But I think long term, we want to understand more than just the KPIs around the concentrators themselves. We want our winners to understand the ways in which this is improving health outcomes at the hospitals. So I want to talk a little bit about our previous winners. We've had 5 winners of the O2 concentrator challenge so far, each in a different country. When we run a competition, we don't have a set number of winners. We might run a full D-Prize competition and make 0 awards in the oxygen space. We're really looking for the right team, the right stage, the right market. And if we don't find that team in a given competition, we just move on. And if we find 10 teams in one competition, well, we can make 10 awards. So there's not a limit here. But these teams all won the award in the first couple rounds or the first cycles of this competition. And so, I mean, you can see I'm not going to just read through each of these teams, but I will pull out some highlights. As you can see, so 4 teams have completed their pilots, and 3 of them serviced roughly the same number of concentrators across roughly the same number of hospitals. And then 1 is an outlier, Oxycare in India, which serviced a ton of concentrators. They actually got started a little bit before they won D-Prize, but their model is also a little different, and I'll talk about that. And then we also have 1 team, Prime Biomedical in Uganda, that is still in the pilot phase. So we don't yet have their 3-month pilot report. Just to give you a sense of what D-Prize asks our winners, when you win a D-Prize award, you get the cash wired to your bank account, you get to set your start date. We advise generally a 3-month pilot, but you could go for longer if that works for you. But we think the funding is really designed for about 3 months of operations. And after your pilot, we ask that you submit a pilot report. It's a very simple form that takes about 30 minutes to fill out. And then we do a 1-hour exit interview where we learn a bit about your pilot, about your successes, your challenges, your plans for the future. So with these previous winners, as you can see, HealthPort, Glomed, and OxyMed had roughly the same number of concentrators reached. Oxycare reached a lot more concentrators. Oxycare and HealthPort are kind of unique. So Glomed and OxyMed and Prime Biomedical, these are ventures run by amazing biomedical technicians, teams that were already thinking about this problem and that are looking to scale the work that they were already doing. For Oxycare and HealthPort, the leaders of these ventures are not biomedical technicians. They are social entrepreneurs who come from different backgrounds, different professional backgrounds. They got excited about this problem. They're working with biomedical engineers as part of their team, but they themselves don't bring those skills. So HealthPort in Nigeria is run by Aisha Adeniji, and she started managing in her D-Prize pilot a team of biomedical engineers working on O2 concentrators. But now as she's scaling, one thing she observed was, this was in contrast to some of our other winners, was a lack of concentrators in her market in Nigeria. And so she's actually working on the O2 Cube right now and on scaling that up. And she just won an MIT Solve Prize to do that work. So we're very excited about that. And then Oxycare in India, Rajesh, the founder of Oxycare, he has basically run like it's like an electronics repair servicing company. Where he was in communication with a lot of last mile technicians. Many of them were basically repairmen for simple household products like televisions. And during the kind of spike in COVID cases, the surge in April 2021, they observed huge medical oxygen shortages in India. So he got newly interested in this problem. And one of his former colleagues, who was a last mile technician, who I believe was a television repairman, called him, said he was out of a job, said he needed work. And the two of them dreamed up this idea to put these last mile technicians who were basically independent contractors who worked on household electronics to put them to work servicing concentrators. And so their model is a little bit different in that they're not activating an existing network of biomedical technicians. They're actually activating these repair people to go out and work on oxygen concentrators. So those are the existing 5 D prize winners, and I'd be really excited. I hope that there are people on this call who could join this group. We are looking to make more awards, and we have an open competition that I'll talk about right now with a deadline coming up. So yeah, the competition itself. I want to talk a bit about how you apply for D prize funding, and we try to make this process as simple as possible. First of all, the D prize funding, which is up to $20,000, we believe it's enough to get you started on a 3-month pilot, but compared to a lot of other funding opportunities, it's relatively small. And so we don't want to be a huge burden. We know you've got a lot going on. We want to make sure this process is simple and that you're not spending weeks and weeks, writing a grant proposal. So the first step is to visit our website. It's d-prize.org. And I'll actually just drop that into the chat as a link if it's helpful, if anyone wants to kind of have 2 tabs open. Oh, that didn't turn into a link. And so the first step is just visit our website. The second step is, for many people applying to D prize, they read through our challenge documents and pick the one that's most interesting to them. But I'll just assume that everyone on this call is most excited about the oxygen concentrator challenge. And so you'd go to that challenge document. Basically on our website, there's a link to a PDF of a 3-page document that outlines what we're looking for and asks a lot of the questions that I've already asked today. So you'd read through that. And the second step is to write a 2-page concept note. And there's guidance for this on our website. So you will, it's not a mystery what you need to write. There's a preset format for your 2-page concept note. And this is basically going to outline your pilot, describe a little bit about your background, talk a bit about your scale goals, your vision for your venture. And then you also want to put together the resumes, the CVs for your team. So these are just your professional resumes. You don't need to make anything super new and fancy. We're looking for generally 1 page per team member. And when I say team member, I mean your leadership team. So people at the kind of executive level of your venture. You don't need to provide something for every technician on your team. Although if your team is quite small, we would love to see information on everyone. And then step 3 is apply online. So it's a very simple online form where you fill out some basic information about your team, you submit your concept note, your resumes, and then you hit submit. And that's as easy as step 1 is. That's how you apply to D prize. And I'll talk about this at the end of the call, but November 6th is our deadline. So that's our regular deadline for this current open competition. You could apply today, you could apply tomorrow, you could apply next week, you could apply anytime before November 6th, and we actually have an extension deadline of later in November as well. So I want to talk about the concept note itself. And this is really where you're going to stand out from the pack. We get around 3,000 applications every competition. But again, that's across all of our sectors. Within oxygen, we probably get between 60 to 70 proposals. So it's many fewer. So it's actually, we tend to find that the applications to this challenge are stronger in general because the teams are already, often they're sector experts like yourselves. They're already focused on this problem. And so it's a stronger pool than our general pool. That being said, it's also a pool where there's a lot of applicants who have a expertise, but they may not fit what D prize is looking for. So maybe their venture has been operating for too long. Maybe their vision is not to scale, but just to support their existing work. These are all reasons why the idea might not be a fit for DPRISE. But I want to stress to everyone on this call that getting a no from DPRISE is, I don't want that to discourage you from doing what you do. DPRISE has very specific things we look for, a very specific stage of growth. And when you hear no from us, it's not a verdict on your expertise, on even on your vision. It's likely more to do with our own unique focus as a funder. And I can't stress this enough for anyone on here who's applied for funding. I definitely decline people who I just think their idea is bad. That happens. I'm not going to say it doesn't, but in many cases, I'm declining an idea because it's not a fit for what I'm looking for. And I wouldn't want a team to, contort themselves or twist their idea to fit my funding opportunity. So one thing we tell our winners who often go out and search for funding is celebrate any no that you get from a funder. Be happy that you got feedback, even if the feedback is just no, we're not going to fund you, because what that means is you can cross them off your list and move on and focus on other funders. And the most important thing in the fundraising game is having a long list of funders and hearing a lot of no's. If you approach 100 funders, you're probably going to hear no 95 to 99 times. But that 1 to 5 times that you hear yes, that's the funding that's going to keep you going. So we really strongly suggest you apply lots of places, and that you don't take a rejection from DPRISE as any kind of verdict on you or your vision. That being said, let's get into writing a competitive concept note. So DPRISE, when we evaluate ideas, and as I mentioned earlier on this call, when we evaluate ideas, this could be helpful if you're applying to other funders, because I imagine other funders use some kind of a similar rubric. So we're looking for really 4 different categories. And this is true of our Oxygen Concentrator Challenge. This is true of every one of our challenges. We're looking for team, model, scale, and impact. And I'm going to return to these 4 items: team, model, scale, impact. So with team, we're looking for an ambitious and balanced team. And I guess to define that further, so for an ambitious team, we're looking for a team that has shown some progress in their career. Maybe if you started at at some level in your field, you've gotten a promotion at some point, or maybe you just, in your early, let's say you're very early in your career, you showed some ambition in your schooling. We want to just see that you have an ambition to launch a venture and grow it. We also want to see a balanced team. And what we mean by this is, if there are multiple team leaders, we want to see that their skill sets balance each other out. So let's say that you are, you've been managing a team of biomedical engineers in a lab. You have a lot of experience working on oxygen concentrators. You know the technical side of things, and you know how to manage your team. Well, if you have a co-founder, we might want to see someone who has more of a finance background, who maybe has some experience with fundraising or some experience with accounting. Someone who can balance out. If you're very operations focused, they're more on the finance side of things. That would be really exciting to us. Obviously, that doesn't always happen, and we do make awards to solo founders, so I don't want to discourage you if you're just on your own. But if you're at the early stage of thinking about your new venture, why not recruit a co-founder who balances out your skills? The second thing we look for is your distribution model, and that is a clear plan to get your product or service into the hands of people who need that. In the case of O2 concentrators, we want to see a very clear plan to get into low resource hospitals, to service concentrators, and hopefully to get contracts signed to maintain those concentrators over time. We want, like, in a lot of cases in the model section, we have questions around your sales force. How are you recruiting more members to your team? How are you training them? How are you motivating them or incentivizing them to do their work? And then, yeah, how are you actually getting your service into the hands of people who need that? And in this case, your service is this repair and maintenance. How do you make sure that you're getting into new hospitals, you're getting those agreements, and you're actually getting concentrators back online? The third thing we look for is a scale plan. And here we're really looking for two things. We want to see an ambition to grow that is ambitious but reasonable. So if you're planning to serve, let's say 5 hospitals in your pilot and maybe reach about 30 concentrators, we want to see a plan by year 1 to perhaps be in 10 hospitals. And by year 2, maybe you're going to be in 50 hospitals. We want to see that there is a progression, and hopefully that it's not a linear growth, that you start to grow faster as you age as an organization. We also want to see some plan for fundraising. So the D-Prize funding is meant to support the first 3 months of a pilot, but we know that to grow your venture, you're going to need more than that $20,000. So who are you going to go to? How much do you need? We want to see ambitious but reasonable targets. If you say by year 1, we want to raise $500,000, that's probably unreasonable. We want to see maybe a plan to raise $100,000, or even in your first year, something like $50,000. And ideally, we'd like to see you name a few potential funders. So whether that's local banks, preferably, actually, I think we'd want to see a list of potential international funders, since I think that's where you're going to quickly find larger amounts of money. And we don't just want to see like, okay, I'll get it from Gates Foundation. Ideally, foundations like that will come in for you. But I think in the early years, it's going to be, you may want to look at kind of someone at a lower tier than that. We also are a little bit skeptical when teams list things like crowdfunding. So if you say, okay, we want to run a GoFundMe page, again, that can be helpful and that could be a part of your fundraising, but that should not be the core part of your fundraising. The final thing we look for is your impact plan. And this is probably the most important, but we assume some impact because you're already working on a problem that we know exists, right? But like I mentioned earlier, we'd love to see a plan to measure impact on not just uptime for concentrators, not just the sort of KPIs that you're all familiar with when it comes to the operation of these concentrators. We'd like to see some KPIs around the health of patients, if at all possible. So yeah, these are the 4 things when we're judging. Our evaluators actually just they write down team, model, scale, and impact, and they write down little notes under each to say, okay, this team ticks these boxes, it has issues here. So I would suggest to you when you're going through and writing your concept note that you keep these 4 things in mind and you make sure that you are effectively communicating on each of these points. So the best concept notes, the ones that we get excited to fund, really answer these questions. Is your team made up of people who can get stuff done? And this is crucial. I suspect that everyone on this call actually is going to be able to answer this question really well, because we also, in our general competition, we get applications from students, we get applications from people pivoting their careers, and there it's a little bit harder to get a sense of their skill set. But you all are already doing the work. You already understand the need for medical oxygen at the last mile. And so I think you'll all be able to answer this question really well. You already get stuff done. But a question for you in putting together the application is, how do you prove that? And I think explaining what you've done so far and why that has set a base for your future growth is important. The second question, is your model sensible with a clear path for distribution to the last mile? So even if your plan doesn't end up working in practice and you make adjustments, which that's going to be the case for a lot of you, right? You're going to come up with a plan, to get hospitals to sign contracts to do maintenance, and the hospitals are going to have pushback and you're going to have to reconfigure your plan. You at least need to come with a plan that makes logical sense. So when you're designing your model, just ask, like, as an example, if you're asking a hospital to sign a service contract, is there a reasonable fee here? Is there a way that the hospital communicates with me as the service provider in a way that will make sense to an outsider like DPRISE trying to understand our business model? The third question, how are you going to scale your pilot after your pilot, including fundraising? So once you've finished those 3 months, once you've reached roughly 5 hospitals and serviced 30 concentrators, how are you going to grow that work? How are you going to fundraise? How are you going to find, when are you going to move into that next region? At what point are you going to reach national scale? And then our final question, what is your impact and how do you measure it? So do you have specific targets for the impact you want to have? And are you working in your everyday operations to measure those targets and see if you're meeting them? And then if you're not meeting them, do you have plans to adjust the way you do your work so that you can meet those aggressive targets? So these are the questions that a great concept note is going to answer. And so specifically for the oxygen challenge, a really great concept note is going to show us a few things. It's going to show us that you are mapping and servicing O2 concentrators, that you know your local market, you know the number of hospitals that have concentrators, you know where those concentrators are, you maybe even have a sense of the number of them. That could change. As we all know, you get out there, you visit a hospital, you've heard something about the number of concentrators they have, turns out not to be true. That's totally fine. But we want to get a sense that you've scoped the problem. We want to see that you're testing a revenue stream with hospitals. Again, this is an area where even some of our winners have struggled. So I'm not going to say, you just have to have a theory here. What are you testing in your pilot? We know that in practice it may work differently, but we want to see that you are trying to come up with a model where you get a revenue stream from hospitals through doing your repairs. This isn't just kind of a free thing you're doing. Even if, again, your pilot, you may say, we need to do this for free to prove to hospitals the value of our work. That's fine. But we want to see that you are communicating with them about how you would institutionalize this work. And then we want to see, and I've mentioned this a lot, a plan to scale. This is probably the biggest thing where we divide out the successful O2 applications from the unsuccessful ones. We see a lot of applications from teams who've already serviced some concentrators and they're looking for funding to just continue their lab at the level where it's already operating. DPRISE funding is not meant to just sustain your existing operations. It is meant to catalyze a venture for growth. It's not meant to fund that growth, but it's meant to fund a 3-month pilot where you experiment with a model that can then grow. So that's really crucial to us, that you have a plan to grow this work after the DPRISE funded pilot. So when should you apply? Well, we put out a call for applications twice per year. Our window stays open for many, many weeks. So actually, I think in total, it's maybe close to 6 months where we actually have open applications. But our applications generally fall in kind of April, May, September, October. We're open right now. We opened on September 5th, and our regular deadline is November 6th. Then we have an extension deadline that goes to the end of November, basically. But I would say get your applications in by November 6th. And there's not really an advantage. You don't need to get off this call and submit today. I would say, actually, if you're, I would digest some of the information from today, read through the challenge document. And if you submit November 6th, that's totally fine. You could submit right at the deadline, and we don't judge anyone. There's no advantage really to applying early. But yeah, November 6th, put that in your calendar. And again, if you miss that deadline, we have an extension deadline later in the month. But the other thing that's true is members of the Oxygen Alliance, like if you have an idea for a D-Prize pilot that fits everything we've talked about today, I'm open if you just want to shoot me an email. I'd love to see a concept note almost any time in the year. We're eager to make awards in this space. And I'm also eager to let you know if you don't qualify for D-Prize, because again, like I said, we don't want to waste your time. We know you've got a lot going on. We know there's a pressing need for funding. And if you're not right for what we're looking for, because your organization is maybe too advanced, it's taken on too much funding, it's already too deep into operations, or perhaps it doesn't quite fit the model of what we're looking for, then I want to let you know and say, you should be looking at other opportunities. But yeah, for those who think this opportunity is relevant to their idea, November 6th is our regular deadline. And then I want to give a quick overview of our application process. So I mentioned about round one that you submit a concept note and your resumes. That's the November 6th deadline. We then spend a couple months reviewing those with a team of expert judges around the world, and then ourselves here at D-Prize. And we invite roughly the top 5% of teams into round two to submit a full 10-page proposal. And actually, I should correct this. We have slashed the 4 weeks to 2 weeks. And we've actually not found, we've done, we've asked applicants, no one has really missed this deadline. It's a pretty simple 10-page full proposal. It's actually, you fill out a form to fill out the 10 pages, so you don't even write it on your own. And so it's a 2-week deadline. Anyway, that's only of interest later in the process. Once you submit that full proposal, we review that, takes a month or two, and then we invite a select number of teams, probably 50% of the teams that get into round two, get to the interview stage where we do a 1-hour interview. And that's done, over Google Meet, just like this call. Once that's complete, that's generally the final stage, we make our awards. And at that point, if you are offered an award, it moves as quickly as you want. If you could upload, we ask that you upload some simple information about your team. We make a website online, and then, barring any issues with your bank account, and which, those do happen, right? Like we have sometimes had issues, but barring that, we wire the money directly to you, and you get started, and you have a end of pilot date where we do that pilot exit interview that I've already discussed. But yeah, that's our evaluation process. The whole thing takes around 5 months right now from, application to award. We're working to try to shorten that. And in some cases, we have been able to successfully shorten that length of time. But that's roughly the length of time it takes us to process about 3,000 applications. So who can apply? You can. This is an amazing group here at the Oxygen Alliance that's already thinking about this problem of medical oxygen access. And so, I return to this, being introduced as an expert here seems not fair at all, because you are the experts and we're just trying to connect you with the support to get launched. So you should apply. And yeah, I just basically want to repeat that, you are all already working on this problem, and I think it's likely that if you are declined by D-Prize, it's basically because you're outside the scope of what we fund in terms of the age of your venture or some of the focus. It's not a verdict on your expertise or your skills. We get people to the general application who maybe have that issue, but everyone who's part of the Oxygen Alliance, you are the experts here. So it's just an honor and a privilege to get to share this information with you today, to share this opportunity. And I'm really excited to see some proposals coming out of this. I also say, this is enough of a group of experts that, and I'll let the Oxygen Alliance know this as well, that if you put through an application, I'm happy to get an email from you, and I'll actually just drop my email into the chat, just letting me know that you applied. This is not going to give you a special consideration or a leg up in the competition, any kind of advantage. But if I get an email from you, I will know that when we, send out applications to our judges around the world, I'll just keep an eye on your application to kind of understand, and I can report back to Oxygen Alliance on how teams performed, and kind of maybe, if we make an award, why we did, and if we didn't, the reason why. Because I want to be really transparent with everyone on this call on our decision-making process. Great. Oops. So yeah, this is the call. Become a distribution entrepreneur. That's what we call our winners. And you may not think of what you do as distribution, but actually you are distributing access to medical oxygen to patients who are in need. You are changing lives in low-resource hospitals around the world. And that work is just, it is so inspiring, as we've all witnessed in the pandemic. It's so necessary. It was necessary before the pandemic. It's going to be necessary after the pandemic. And I'm just really excited to meet all of you. So please visit d-prize.org and put together an application today. So that's the end of my presentation. I know we have a little over 10 minutes left in the call today. And yeah, happy to take questions. I see one in the chat right now from Kibit. Only 5% of the proposals. Does that not leave many proposals out? I mean, it's true, it does. I mean, that's 5% of 3,000 proposals get invited into round two. So 150 or so proposals, is a little more than that actually. That's a large number of teams considered. And like I mentioned, we only make right now around 30. Probably this year we might make closer to 50 awards. So you're right, Kibit. It's not very many. We generally find that there are some great ideas in the mix, but there's a lot of teams out there who are just not right for the D-Prize opportunity. We're very specific. We're looking at the distribution of proven poverty interventions. We're looking at organizations that are at the idea stage or very early. So we get a lot of proposals from teams that have already raised a bunch of money and they're looking to add D-Prizes, $20,000 to their operating expenses. But that's not what D-Prize does. We provide catalytic early stage funding. So yes, a lot of proposals don't make it forward, but we try to be very transparent about that and let you know that it's a tough competition. But I also mentioned, we see, maybe around 60 auction proposals, and we might invite 10 of those teams in. So that's a higher proportion of teams invited into the second round for the Oxygen Challenge. Other questions? And also, I don't know if people are able to unmute, but I'm happy to take questions that way.
Yes, people can unmute. So thank you so much, Will. I think that was really informative, and you covered a lot of information that will hopefully be really helpful to those that were with us today, and of course, anyone that watches the recording later. We are, of course, open for questions. You can raise your hand, you can call them out, you can put them in the chat. I don't think anyone liked our new question and answer module that we tried, but that's okay. And I am happy to kick it off with a question while we are waiting. And I think my question, just because, we are very proud of the fact that we do have a lot of winners from the D-Prize that are Auction Alliance members. Would you be able to maybe find or summarize one or two reasons as to why you feel that group of winners did actually go ahead and what made their applications different?
Yeah, that's a great question. I sort of split our winners into two categories broadly. We've got a group of winners, three winners of the five who were biomedical engineers or technicians already working on the problem of oxygen access. So that is GloMed Technologies, OxyMed Global Solutions, and Prime Biomedical. And then we have two teams that were founded, by outsiders to the oxygen world, people who were not necessarily technical experts, but were more like social entrepreneurs. That's OxyCare and HealthPort. But all these teams, kind of regardless of which bucket they fall into, shared a couple things. I will say that they were all either idea stage or very early in their operations. So, HealthPort really kind of idea stage, had not launched. OxyCare and then Glomed, OxyMed, Prime Biomedical all had done some level of work on oxygen concentrators already, but kind of, I would say, early stage sort of proof of concept and hadn't taken on outside funding. And then all teams shared a vision to grow their work, so to get their work kind of beyond those initial set of hospitals. I think we see a lot of proposals that we decline that basically say, I've served X number of concentrators, and I'm hoping to kind of like continue to serve that number. I don't really have a plan to grow. Follow-on funding that they were hoping to secure post-DPRISE. And then they all had at least some theory of how they would get a hospital to agree to a service contract. In practice, and this is where I really would love to learn more from the Alliance in general, in practice, those service contracts prove pretty hard to execute. And I think that no one has effectively solved that problem long-term of our winners. It's possible that people within the Oxygen Alliance have solved that. But yeah, I would say the shared qualities are kind of an ambition to scale, including some fundraising targets post-DPRISE, a theory of how they might, create a long-term relationship with hospitals, and then I guess sort of probably there's at the final level of the interview, kind of an X factor around a team in the interview who convinces us. I mean, it's still about growth for us. It's still a team that is saying, I don't just want to continue operating in the one hospital I'm working or at the university where I'm employed. I want to grow regionally and nationally. That's really crucial.
Thank you, Will. Do we have any other questions? Okay, if we don't, then let me ask you one last question and we'll give people a few minutes back. What is the one piece of advice you would give anyone looking to write a proposal or win a grant, whether it's with the DPRISE or some of those organizations that are a little bit already have started and the DPRISE wouldn't be a right fit for them, but as someone who is on both sides of doing, sending in applications as well as reviewing grant applications, what would be the one piece of advice that you would give anyone in that process?
Wow, that's a great question, and one that I wish I were asked more often, because I think my advice would be have a very clear value proposition early on. We see a lot of concept notes that spend the first full page, maybe into the second of 2 pages, in with many words outlining the problem. Describing the problem that's happening with oxygen access and why concentrators are important. In our competition, through our concept note, a lot of that is already defined. We do want to see that you understand your market, but we want to really understand what is your distribution model. So rather than spend the first page just kind of saying, medical oxygen is important and it's currently not accessible in the region where I want to operate, we want to see the number of hospitals you're going to reach, how you're going to convince them to work with you, how you're going to get agreements to get into those hospitals, front load that information. And do it in fewer words, find a way to obviously, as you can see from this call, I talk a lot, so I'm not always the most concise, but I think I want to be able to hear from you in one sentence, your model, or maybe not your model, but your value proposition. What does your venture do? So that would be my advice.
Wonderful. So thank you very much, Will, and thank you for joining us at the Oxygen Alliance. As a reminder, we will go back to the usual concentrator talk next week, so feel free to send in your questions related to concentrator repair and maintenance. We still have our website and our YouTube channel that we'll put the links in the chat so that you can access. And my last question would be, if you are newly joining us today, please feel free to send us your email address here in the chat. We will be sticking around for a few minutes so that we can add you to all of our emailing lists and our calendar invites so that you don't miss anything that we send out. So thank you very much, Will. This was wonderful. I think we all learned a lot and some really useful information. So thank you and goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.